Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Blindspot, as well as the latest episode of The Blacklist. Like always, I'm going to talk about something that you want to listen to. You can always look in the description down below. I include the time I'm going to start talking about each of your respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Blindspot, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Blacklist. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Blindspot. A great episode. First and foremost, picking up where the previous episode left off, having Jane and Kurt, well, Remy and Kurt fighting, and it's like, yo, which is crazy. It's also interesting because I was like, that fight went a little rougher, in particular on the Kurt side of things, because I was actually surprised he kind of like threw her around, like landed blows like he did, because I was like, I mean, you would think just because it's still Jane that he'd be reserved to do it. I mean, he was kind of like, don't make me do this, like, I don't want to hurt you, but then at the same time, it's like, well, to be fair, it's Remy you're fighting, and she will not hesitate to kill you, even though she's kind of hesitated before, so it's kind of like you need to kind of subdue her and take her out, so. But they hook her up, Kurt ends up taking her down, but they end up hooking her up to the machine. And it's such an interesting thing. I love when this show does like really kind of different episodes. Like they experiment every once in a while. They've done it more this season. There's that whole episode that was done from Rich and Patterson's point of view. Like all the stuff that we typically see on an episode basis. Like all the outside stuff was done off screen and we didn't really get to see it. So they always do interesting things like that. What I think is interesting about this episode is that it's very reflective of the episode they did with Patterson last season when she was in her coma. I love that episode. That episode was so good. And this episode is just as great. It's so fantastic because there's a lot of similarities, because obviously kind of doing like this whole like giant metaphor, because obviously that was all about Patterson also dealing with a lot of stuff she hadn't really dealt with. This is the same thing, but in a different contrast of like Jane fighting herself, like trying to exert dominance over her brain, because like one side of her is Jane, the other side of her is Remy. It's kind of interesting because like the whole Patterson thing was more of like a dramedy, kind of like a lot of comedy, but a lot of drama, whereas like Jane's situation, like a horror, borderline psychological thriller in some regards. Like it's creepy, but it does have its little lighthearted moments, especially when everybody shows up and everything there to help. She's like, Reed, I'm so happy to see his hot drink or whatever. And then Rich shows up and it's like, oh, no one got shot. Tasha shows up and shoots her, like, what the hell are you doing? She's like, I'm helping. Rich is like, I don't know about that. Patterson's like, I think you need to look up the definition of helping. And it's just kind of like how it all plays out like that. Even later on when she's like, okay, you guys aren't coming with me? They're like, no, I got some things to do. And then even Tasha just being like, yeah, I don't want to go. It's just kind of, they're all making up excuses. It's like, oh, but you can't go. But it's like, we'll always be here for you. So I thought how that was all done and constructed was so well done. And I like I said, I like the whole aspect of it is kind of like about getting your brain back, because it was a situation where Jane had to confront, obviously, because she's slowly remembering all the stuff that, because at first she had to remember Kurt and it slowly trickled out. I even love what Patterson said of like, we're, for such a long time, we've been this shape. Now it's time for us to find a new shape. I thought that was so like sweetly said, and just like, I mean, it's very representative of their current state, especially things going forward. I'll get to that at the very end when we kind of talk about the end of the episode and everything. But I was like, that was so nicely said, and I'm very interested to see that new shape they ultimately end up taking when it's all said and done. So, an interesting element is like that whole like, Roman situation of like him kind of being almost monster-like. Once again kind of like going back to not just a horror movie, a psychological thriller, him just chasing after her like that, kind of being very monstrous. And it was such an interesting thing too, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna challenge you to this game. It's like, wait, that was the game you and Remy played. Why did I pick that? And he's like, that is an interesting question, isn't it? And I also thought it was kind of interesting, too, because her apologizing, too. He's like, for what? Oh, not being able to kill me? She's like, no, for not protecting you. Not protecting you for Shepard. Obviously, everything that happened between us, from Shepard to Crawford's, orphanage, like all that. Like, she's like, I even gave you the zip poisoning. I was trying to give you a second chance, but he's like, the fact of the matter is, it's not like you could have known. Like, Shepard knew, and she kept that from both of us. So it's not like you knew. But, because she had the best intentions in mind, because she cared about him a lot, and she wanted him to have a new chance like she did. And I thought that was, because I like how they did that too, how they started it off, because it seemed like it was kind of like it was like a remix of the first episode of her and Kurt meeting to a certain extent, and I thought that was kind of nicely done. But Roman telling her, like, you know, you've already won, that there's someone that knows you, because for her it's like Roman's the only person who's known all of her as Remy, but also got to know her as Jane, you know, and it's like no one knows all those sides of her. Like, oh, there's someone else that's like this. She's like Kurt, which later on is kind of like that other person is Remy. But I'll get to that in a second. It's actually kind of interesting. I didn't even think about that. I completely, it's like, well, it didn't correlate in my head, but technically, Jane is actually 3 different people. Technically, it is really 2, because that who she was as Alice became Remy, and that side of Alice died the moment Shepard got her hands on Alice and made her Remy. Like, you know, because that's why she was like, oh, Shepard's threatening. It's like, oh, I'll kill her, and it's like, you already did, like, all that time ago, and you made her. So there's no longer like, because it's like Alice is who they used to be. It's actually kind of interesting, because I never thought about it before. So technically, like, even Remy isn't who she originally was. Like, Alice was her original identity, but she became Remy, then she lost her memories and became Jane. It's so interesting. I guess the argument could be made Jane is who she would have been if she had never become Remy. There's that, I guess, it's looked at as kind of like the situation of like, okay, this is the metaphor of like, you know, her getting back to who she was, the side of herself that she never really got to know, the person she isn't anymore. I guess it's more so like, because there's a lot to talk about, dude. Because for one, like, Shepard showing up, trying to make Jane see all the bad stuff that's happened, like, you know, Mayfair's death, the truth about her situation. Like, it's not just the pain in her own personal life and what she's dealing with, but also the pain that's echoed out. That's kind of like the waves that have, you know, pushed out because of her. That everyone else has kind of got caught up in, but then Jane kind of switches it around and kind of like dives into the good parts of her life. And then, you know, and there was also that sad aspect of like, well, I'll talk about the very interesting aspect of like, okay, no one's here, but what she does is like, you guys are always supposed to be by my side. It's like, okay, so how would they solve this? And she starts working it like Rich and Patterson would, figuring out everything. And I thought that was kind of nicely done. But then also the sad aspect of like, oh, here's you having to constantly save Kurt over and over again, and she won't get close to Remy because Remy knows that you'll keep wanting to save her. I was thinking that could have turned out a lot darker than it did, just because it's kind of like, because what do? Do you choose winning over saving the man that you love? But for her, it's like, no, I know you're not the real Kurt, you're me. Like, I guess because she realizes, no, this is all part of my subconscious, but you're not the real Kurt, so I have to sacrifice you to make this happen so I can get back to the real Kurt. Still kind of broke her heart to do it, but her and Remy fighting was interesting. Because it brought up a lot of interesting things too, because for Jane, it's like, I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to make peace, because the fact of the matter is, neither one of us is the enemy. Shepard is. She took you and forged you into a weapon. She left you all alone. Like, that's what, because that was the thing. Like, Remy grew up alone. That's why her and Roman were in the situation they were in, because they only had each other, because they were never able to get close to anyone. You know, the way Shepard forged them so they wouldn't have connections with people, so that they would be the weapons that they are. So, and it's kind of sad, because that is, like I said, once again, like, Jane is who Remy would have been if Shepard had never found her and Roman. That's also the thing too. Like, I mean, because I think that's such an interesting parallel too, because it also ties back to Roman back in season 2 when he got hit with the zip. It's like, even though he had his because he was so psychologically damaged already, like Remy was too, but I guess like the zip worked in a very different, like, I guess it, you know, depending on your brain chemistry and everything that's going on inside your head, it affects you differently, because Roman kind of had his kinder side too, but it didn't compartmentalize like I think it did with Remy with the whole Jane situation. I even love the Dr. Nancy explaining that, being like, basically Zip created a barrier that separated, you know, and locked off, you know, Remy's memories, but created Jane while also allowing her to create new memories, and obviously representing the fact that the zip poisoning ended up switching the two around. So that was interesting. But I did like I said, when they like came together, because for her it's like, because Jane's like, I'm not alone. I have all my friends. I have my family that, you know, I've created that's by my side. And the fact of the matter is, like, you know, I I get what you did. You did a lot bad because I can remember what you did when you were pretending to be me. But what did you also do? You did good. She's like, no, I was just pretending. It's like, even though she was, pretending and everything, what we probably thought was Jane coming out was probably the actual good sides of Remy. That could be all that Jane is. Jane is all the good that Remy could be and is, So, but to see them kind of come together, and also that scene, I just like aesthetically how it looked, and it was cool, like the gun breaking from Shepard, and Shepard kind of breaking apart like that was so interesting, and just like her sitting in the main chair, and just like the office kind of filling up again. I was like, dude, that was so amazingly done, and I like that because it was, as the episode was progressing, I felt like that was going to be the outcome, but like prior to that, I never would have thought we would have gotten to that point where it's like Jane is now both, she remembers everything as Remy. Now that's what I'm curious about too. Like it didn't come up, but I'm wondering, will she ever go back to who she was before? Like will this kind of push her to go, I want to be Alice? It's kind of interesting because I made a video, like a nerd mode, before season 4 premiered, that I talked about the fact is like, ironically, I can, like, in all honesty, say that, Jane does not remember everything. At this point, she remembers everything. Her life is Jane, her life is Remy. And for her, it's like, I actually, for the first time in my life, at least to my knowledge, I feel like a whole person. Because even as Remy, she was never a whole person anyway, just because like everything that Shepard kind of forced her into. But now it's like, we're two sides of the same coin, and it's like those sides are now combined and everything. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I wonder, will there be any personality change, like some little aspects of Remy that still kind of live on? I doubt it. It probably is just 100% Jane from now on. But I am curious to see whether or not she will eventually go, you know what? Maybe it's time for a change, and she goes, I'm no longer just 100% Jane. I am Alice now, now that she remembers everything. That could be a route that they take. That actually kind of took me by surprise too, because it's interesting, because it's like, this is like the first half of the season, and that storyline's already done, and I thought it was kind of neatly wrapped up. But it's kind of like Jane's kind of happy to be back and everything, and the little Rich being like, and then Patterson looks at him, he's like, what? Shut up. You're crying. I love how that was done. The whole Shepard thing, I was like, oh man. I was like, oh, so that's where it's going to go. Is Shepard going to be on her own doing some things? And I was like, Sandstorm is still broken up. So she goes and attacks Kurt and everything. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, crap. I was like, please don't make this a situation where we're going to kill Kurt. Oh, God. Luckily, Jane shows up in time, and she says what she needs to say. It's like, because Shepard's like, the fact that matters, I'm your mother. I loved you in Rome. And she's like, yeah, maybe in your own sick, twisted way you did. Or maybe you didn't. I don't know. I don't even think you know. But the fact of the matter is, you won't hurt anyone else like you did me in Rome. And, the fact is, goodbye, Shepard, so... And I think that's nicely done, because that means sadly, it puts everything. Because now, like, I guess it fits, because it's like now she's saying goodbye completely to her past. She's embraced all of who she is and who she was, and now all ties to who she was in the past. Like Shepard, the last piece that was clinging, because I think that's also why Remy clinged on to her so roughly, because it was kind of like she felt lost without Shepard, because Shepard was always there. Shepard made her who she was, so without Shepard she felt lost, and she wanted to get some balance back. Like, I don't think she wholeheartedly believed in that whole mission that Shepard had forged her for, but it was just because it was all she knew. She didn't know how to live without that mission. She could have gone on pretending to be Jane, but it's like, no, Shepard made me into this weapon, and I'm gonna feel that goes. So for her, it was like, that's all she could focus on. That's all she had. Once again, like, outside of Shepard and Roman, she had nobody. That was the difference between her and Jane. But I'm very interested to see kind of where that all goes. I mean, that's interesting enough, because I brought it up earlier about the whole, like, what shape they're going to take on now. Because even Rich was like, yeah, man, everything's good. It's like, no more lies and, no more drama. And immediately hard cut to Reed bringing in an arrested Tasha, and it's like, so much for no more drama. So that's definitely going to be interesting. It seems like that and the whole Madeline and HEI Global situation is going to be the second half of the season, which is interesting, because I'm so curious to see what Tasha's excuse is going to be, like what her thing is going to be. Is like like, like I said, did she join some other organization? Like, I mean, like some other, like, the Brit, like MI6, like British CIA or something like that. Like, is she secretly working with the CIA, but they're denouncing? Like, I felt like that wasn't the case because Keaton didn't know anything, but, it could have been even above his pay grade. So, like I said, it's interesting because, like, one chapter closes, another opens, because now it's going to be like a whole complicated can of worms with Reed and Tasha. I'm so curious too what's going to happen. Like, is Jane going to explain everything to Reed? Are they going to let that out? What about White's? Because Jane Jane remembers everything that Remy did, but it's like, yeah, this is technically going to be her meeting White's for the first time subsequently since his promotion and stuff like that. Them actually all working together. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward. I wonder will they do any more episodes. Like I said, it's such a very interesting episode. Like, they've been doing like I said, this is so interesting. I like it because it's kind of like a very straightforward show in certain regards. And so it's interesting when they're able to kind of have the freedom to kind of go a little weird in certain episodes. Because obviously, like, this whole episode took place inside of Jane's brain. It was all a giant metaphor for what was going on inside of her head. So, like very much like the Patterson, even though but it's all in their head and it's some giant metaphor, it still means so much, that adventure, because it's also about where it's not just the adventure in this situation, it's also the destination and like where that destination is going to take Jane going forward from here. So there's also something interesting. Did anyone else feel anything from Nancy when Jane was like, "Oh, nice to meet you," and she was like, "Nice to meet you"? It seemed like there were more there. I'm like, is that going to be like some twist where it's like, actually she's your biological mom, you just didn't know it or something like that? Probably not. But it just seemed like there was something more to that. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just kind of like, hey, thank you for bringing me back. It's probably just going to end up being that. But it seemed like it seemed there was something there. But like I said, that could be me 100% reading too much into this situation. Either way, I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Blacklist. A lot of things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. The fact of the matter is, we have Reddington going to court. The dude that's Seema in this episode, who's prosecuting him, I believe that's because I saw his name in the opening. I think that's his name. I could be wrong, but Ken Leung, been in like Rush Hour, Lost, like he's done quite a few things. You've seen that dude around, like he's been in quite a few things, so that's pretty cool. That whole court, like everything that went down in that regard was very interesting, because even like Liz is continuing to stress it, like, do you not realize what's going on? Reddington's kind of pissed because like they won't even let me get my own lawyer. Like they're giving me a court appointed one, but still. But he's not taking this as seriously as he should, because even Liz is like, are you not worried? He's like, no, I'm not worried. The fact of the matter is, here's a new blacklist. And she's like, wait, what? You're literally giving us, a job while you're in prison, because it kind of shows you him compartmentalizing. With everything that kind of goes down, I'll explain my thought process later. Well, I'll kind of tie it all together in the long run, so I'll just go ahead and start it from here. The fact of the matter is, it's about, Stark. He's this guy trying to make a cure for this particular disease in this episode. And obviously he gives it to people, they die, and now it becomes because even Reddington's like, I invested in his company because I believed in it, I believed all the good that he was going to be able to do with it, but now it's like, seeing the 5 bodies is like, most likely he might be the one that, he might be doing this all for selfish gain. Well, as it progresses later on, because you find out there's that dude Kirby who actually got cured by Stark. So it's like, why cure him and then kill everybody else? Even I was like, was he just twisted? Like, is there more to that? Like, what's going on there? Because I was starting to think like, oh, did he help fake everything? Did he make it seem like Kirby had this disease when in actuality he didn't? I thought that was the route was going to go. It's like, no, Stark is actually a good guy. The dude that he's working with, Webb, was there to sabotage everything. He's the one that was poisoning people. So it's like, that was something I didn't expect to see coming, because I thought he was just kind of like a mad scientist doing whatever he wants to. I'll keep going. I mean, he would, I guess, because it kind of all goes back, because the fact of the matter is he injected himself with a malaria vaccine that literally kind of paralyzed part of his face, his arm, and one of his legs. So it's kind of like, it's kind of made you go, oh, maybe he is a good guy, but then it's kind of like, oh, maybe he's not. Like, you wasn't really sure, but now it's like, nope, he's definitely a good guy, which is kind of sad, especially for him, because he was even saying all that stuff to Webb, being like, oh, thank you for your partnership and your friendship, always being by my side. You could tell it was affecting him because he almost kind of felt bad, but he still went along with it anyway. I hope they never said anything. I hope that other guy survived, because the one that got at the end who actually injected himself, that's the dude that was like, oh, I want to spend time with, what is it, his granddaughter or something like that. It's like, I was hoping that they'd get there in time. They got there before the others injected himself, but he was the one that did. But maybe because they knew what it was ahead of time, maybe they were able to get to him in time. I don't think they explained whether or not he actually lived or not. I hope so, especially because he's like the one that they gave an even more sympathetic story to. I mean, it's already a very sympathetic situation because these are people in a desperate situation. The sad thing is, it turns into like a big pharma thing, because it's like, oh yeah, like Crown Life, the company that's making not really a cure but a treatment that at least alleviates the symptoms, because there is no current cure for this illness. Turns out they hired Webb to be under Stark, so they could like compromise everything he's doing and bury it. It wasn't about like, oh, we're going to take the cure for ourselves and sell it, mass produce it. It's like, no, bury it so that we can continue using our treatment, which won't cure it, but it'll be enough to kind of, people hold on to it and keep buying it over and over, because a treatment is better than an outright cure for them. So it's like, that shows you how shitty they are. But then like Denbei comes later on and visits Stark, and it's like, yeah, Mr. Reddington wants to know everything's still in order, and I'm like, Reddington's sick, because it's like, because even Wrestler brought it up earlier in the episode. It's like, there's something more to this. Like, there's no way he just gives us this like Blacklist or off, out the kindness of his heart. Because the fact of the matter is, Reddington himself even said it. He was like, I believed in what he was doing, and then like, for him to know and be as tapped in with Stark like that, like, he already made it clear, like he was an investor and stuff like that. But it just like, the look on his face, it didn't just look, in retrospect, it's like, that wasn't the look of someone who just lost an investment. Like, it's a, oh well, he turned out to be a terrible person, there was that. But I guess, it's because it seems like Reddington is personally motivated by this. Now that's interesting, because I don't remember if they brought this up during the episode, whether or not that disease is hereditary or not. Because the fact of the matter is, like, obviously that's a kept secret right now, whether or not, because he's like, Reddington is counting on you that it gets here on schedule. I'm sure it's about helping other people, but Reddington in particular. Or could this be more specifically be about Liz? That kind of goes back to what I was talking about, if it was hereditary or not. Because later on, Liz might find out that Red's sick, and it turns out, wait, I have the same illness. Wait, Reddington is my biological father. So that might be what they're doing, if it turns out that this thing is hereditary or not. Like, I don't think they brought it up this episode, whether it is or not. If they did, I completely missed it. But that might be an angle we see kind of go forward. But that's where I'm thinking that it has to be the reason why he's so invested, and he wants to make sure that even under these circumstances, it turns out, hey, Stark is actually a good guy. And the fact is, because he's like, okay, good. So that means everything he's doing isn't BS. So this cure of his actually does work and everything. So I want it to kind of, it's going to impede things a little bit, him being in a, locked up for leaving the bodies behind and stuff like that. But in general, he's not as bad off, he's not as guilty in this situation as Webb is. So that's an interesting development. I'm curious to see kind of where that goes, which is interesting because Reddington is sick like that. It makes you wonder, has he always been sick? Is that something he recently discovered? Like, what's going on in that regard, So we'll just kind of have to wait and see whether that seems like that's the most logical choice. Logical thought amongst like what that could be, but like I said, we'll see in the long run whether or not that ends up being the case. But on the other side of this, we do have Reddington, like I said, representing himself in court, which was kind of interesting. I love that, Reddington kind of handled things the way he is, like, oh, approach the bench, and it's like, yeah, the government has an immunity deal with me. I was like, wait, you're just dropping that? Because Harold's supposed to keep that hush-hush, but then the judge was like, what the hell you get? Wait, what? And then ask Seema, he's like, if there's something like that I'm not aware of. It's like, she's like, that's not a no. And then he's like, oh, Harold come up here and tell her. I was like, what's Harold going to do? Harold's going to deny it, isn't he? This is going to get awkward. Harold's like, yes, there is. I was like, what? I was shocked that Harold actually said anything. And then they're going back there, and even like the judge being like, oh, so Main Justice made a deal with the devil. And you have Reddington being like, aren't judges supposed to at least pretend to be impartial about this whole situation? I was expecting even more shenanigans than we got with him representing himself as his own lawyer and stuff like that. But it's like, I object. And the judge is like, what are you objecting? I took your side in this situation. I object everything about him from his tie to his demeanor. And it's like, I love you, Reddington. Because the guy was, Seema was kind of chewing at Harold. Like, let's break a few things down about that whole situation. Harold lied on the stand at first, though, about, like, it's like, oh, has Reddington committed any crimes, that would undo his immunity deal? And he has. But Reddington, because he believes so strongly in what they do, he stresses it countless times, because the fact of the matter is, he's like, if it wasn't for Reddington, we wouldn't have caught a lot of the bad, evil people that we've killed or caught in the past. The fact of the matter is, we've stopped weapons, we saved lives. The fact of the matter is, we've even caught people within our own government who were evil, and we were able to expose all that because of Reddington. The fact of the matter is, and I love that every time Reddington kind of talked about it, he's like, the fact that, because when it was all said and, well, I'll finish up my thought, and the fact is, for Seema, it's like, it's that, the literal deal with the devil, because it's like, yeah, you suppose that we did all this, you got all this good and stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is, it still stems from the fact is that this goes against justice, that such an evil man gets an opportunity, he doesn't deserve it. All the countless crimes that he's committed, he's literally considered kind of like, a boss in the criminal world. So it's kind of like, and even when it was Reddington's turn, he's kind of like, allegedly this infamy I have as like some infamous like crime boss or something like that. Because I always love that, because you have to say allegedly, to protect yourself and stuff like that. I just think that's kind of funny. But what I thought was really interesting was what Reddington kind of said, like how he broke it down of being like, at the end of the day, you don't like it. It's okay. Obviously, Seema doesn't like it. Obviously, you, the judge, don't like it. Typical American person, typical American most likely won't like the fact is that I have a deal with the government, that they gave me this immunity deal that blocks everything that me being, any bad stuff I've done in the past. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is, it exists. Because the fact of the matter is, the same people who made that decision, to give me an immunity deal are the same people trying to pretend like the past 5 years have not happened. But because even a judge admitted, it's like, the fact of the matter is, I don't like this immunity deal, and the fact of the matter is, because she doesn't know who Reddington is, because in the sense of like, he has not been tried or convicted for all those alleged crimes, so they can't be used against him on kind of determining his character. Because he's never been tried for all of that, because the immunity deal immediately came up before, he could even be tried and everything. So there's that. But it still sticks because the Constitution protects him. And it's that thing, it makes her feel split on the subject, because it's like, the fact of the matter is, like, she probably believes Reddington's guilty. She knows probably in her fiber that, yes, he's an evil person, he's done some evil stuff. But it's not about what she feels. It's not about what she thinks. It's what they can prove and what's laid out before her. And he's never been tried for the things that he's allegedly, the crimes he's allegedly committed. So it's like, man, that's crazy. It spawned so many other conversations. Because, like, for one, Liz was kind of upset because it's like, Reddington used you, which Harold's response actually surprised me in that regard too, because he was like, it's okay, because for him it's like, the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, the government wants to deny what happened, that they made this agreement and now they want to sweep it under the rug like it didn't happen. And the fact of the matter is, I'm all about the truth. I will go speak the truth, which he kind of lies on the stand and stuff like that, but we'll get to that in a second. But it's like, for him, all I'm going to do is tell the truth, because I don't want to be a part of something that's just going to like sweep this under the rug and lie. But later on, because even Reddington's like, I know, an honorable, decent man like you lying like that took a lot. But for him, it's like, the fact of the matter is, I did it to protect me and my team. And Reddington's like, I guess I was just kind of like a convenience in that regard, of just kind of like all situations aligned, protecting me ended up protecting you and your team and the good work. Because at the end of the day, that's because Harold truly believes that the fact is that they do good work. That's always been something he struggled with, but he, like, the to him, the pros outweigh the cons. The fact of the matter is, for him, it's like, he even said it, like, if given an opportunity, you bet I would make this deal again because of just what good that they've done. Like, they can't, like, actually calculate the good that they've actually done in this regard. And it's kind of interesting because even Reddington was like, I actually thought you might actually have chose to tell the truth, but, like, Harold's like, oh, I considered it. But then he was like, I literally presented the same question to Liz. That didn't even cross my mind until he pointed it out. I was like, right, you literally asked Liz that same thing. And I guess her response is what made him, is like, if Liz, even after everything that she's been through, that she's decided to stick through this, I'm curious, like, if she hadn't made that choice, if that conversation hadn't happened, how would Harold feel in this regard? I still think he might feel the way that he does, but I think Liz's opinion and how she feels about the situation, like, tilted him even more in that direction. I think he was already going to be in that direction because I think he still believed a lot of what he said, but who knows? Maybe things would have been a lot different if it wasn't for, like, Liz's opinion kind of formulating his own like that. But what really got me was like, oh, when it's all said and done, I'm like, yo, is Reddington literally about to get away with this? I was like, wow, that's crazy. I thought this would be a bigger part. And then Seema brings up, what about the gun? I was like, what? Oh my God. So it's like, because he had an unregistered gun with the serial number scratched off, because it's supposed to be like a state crime, and I guess with the immunity deal, unless he commits a federal crime, then it won't undo his immunity deal, because state crimes is one thing, but if he commits another federal crime, it gets rid of everything. But the serial number being scratched off made it a federal crime. But then Reddington talked about the fact is that it was an illegal search and seizure by which the gun was discovered, so it's removed from evidence. But now he has to go to court about that, because now it's so interesting, because once again it's like it took something simple as some beat cops arresting him. Obviously we know there's more to it than that now, but at the same time it's like, because of that and this gun, it could be the end of Reddington, because it's interesting because Samara is having that whole conversation with Stark, because Stark's still stunned by, like, I can't believe Webb did this to me. And the fact of the matter, she's like, it's the people closest to you never see coming. Once again, it's like, and I meant to reiterate this last episode because it's something I brought up in episode for the premiere of the season, but it's like, once again, Liz is his blind spot. Reddington's never going to want to see Liz for who she really is, that she's being duplicitous, and it's scheming behind his back. I say duplicitous almost like, ooh, it's this negative, hateful thing, but it's kind of like, she's kind of the good guy in the situation in the sense that she's just trying to figure out the truth. It's just, she's kind of put Reddington in a hard place. And it is the same thing of like, you're lying so much to his face because you're the one that put him in this situation, yet you're so concerned. I think it's because there is a part of her that knew she could remove Reddington from play, but she didn't realize how things would spiral like they have. She probably thought things would probably be a little, well, there's no way she thought they'd be a lot more cut and dry, because the fact of the matter is, maybe she was hoping that Reddington had a contingency plan, because I think she might be worried that, like, Reddington isn't prepared for this. I mean, he's been prepared for, like, the past 3 years. He's acting like he's got everything under control, but the fact is, Liz is there. She kind of knows his playbook to a certain extent, so she knows how to she knows where the skeletons are buried. She knows enough about him to kind of use against him. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that kind of progresses, especially as he moves on to court like that, gets sent to a legit prison. Now that's going to be interesting when Raymond Reddington is running around a prison, and it's like, what's going to happen there? Like, who's he going to associate himself with? Is he going to run into some familiar faces or what? Like, what's going to go on with that? I wonder, did he sneak some people in or not? Then you also have Denbei being like, yeah, man, I don't know who betrayed Reddington. It's actually kind of interesting because let's not forget back in season 4, that was the whole thing. Like, Denbei was kind of looked at as kind of like being the one who betrayed Reddington, when in actuality it was Kate. But he was trying to figure out who it was that was trying to come after Reddington. It's kind of like we're kind of bringing that back in this regard. And he's like, right there in front of the person, not realizing how guilty she is. I thought that was kind of, it's all fascinating how that ends up playing out in that regard. So it's definitely going to be interesting as that whole situation continues as it is. Like, Liz continuing to lie to not only Reddington, but even Denbei. the others, wrestler in particular, knows something's up. Harold must have some idea. I'm sure Samar and Haram have no idea. Which, speaking of Samar, we are finally kind of seeing, like, the effects of, like, what happened to her, because she couldn't think of the word sabotage. She was like, what's the word? And it's like, because I was actually wondering if that was going to tie into the whole Stark situation, because I didn't know it was just this one specific thing that he was trying to cure. I was thinking, like, maybe eventually he'd meet Samar, and Samar would be kind of someone that he took an interest in, and he's like, something's up with you, maybe I can help. So, obviously, she's keeping it hush-hush, not letting anyone know, because obviously she didn't let her doctor know at the beginning, like, during her checkup, like, whether or not she had any memory loss, kind of hard time. The moment the doctor brought that up, it's like, that's going to come up, but it didn't come up until now, which is interesting. So, obviously, it's something she's keeping from Aram, too, so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, because I'm sure that's going to get worse and worse as the season progresses, but we'll have to wait and see in that regard. Because I'm sure it's going to be something that could legitimately jeopardize her work, because she might start not just forgetting words, but forgetting, like, what she's doing, where she was supposed to be going, like, stuff like that, I am so interested to see where all of this takes us into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good